What would it mean then to paint a hand like this? This is Bouguereau's detail from The Teaching of Bacchus. Or a hand like this from Picasso. Or a hand like this from Picasso. I think that these are questions that we need to start asking as artists. We need to look at that. We don't look anymore. We don't look at anything. We want to flip through the books. We want to flip through the magazines. We want to see what someone's wearing. You know, I bought an outfit one time, and I like color, so I bought this great new tie, and no one noticed it. It took 6 times before my best friend said, I like that tie. I don't think anybody was looking. And I think that if we want to develop art, and we really want to have an understanding of it, and especially in the pictures that we have, we need to stop looking at the names and thinking about the concepts and start looking at the image. And what exactly was, Picasso chose to make those hands like that. He chose to have them blue. He chose, instead of that, to not paint them like that, if he wanted to, or was interested, or whatever, it doesn't matter. He chose to paint them like that. And that's a very different message, as well as that. And then we have our urinal. This was actually voted the most important work of art in the 20th century by students in England, and I think that says a lot. I'm not judging what that means, but I'm judging why didn't they think these were. Because these are much more pretty than those are. Now, I'm taking the context out. We're just talking about how things are made. I'm not talking about whether they should or should not be important. I'm not making fun of the urinal necessarily, because it was very interesting in 1913 to make fun of pretension. But I am talking about the meaning of something and its context, especially with some urinal that looks like that. That's a different thing. And that's the thing when we're starting to talk about execution, because that's not something that's a particularly easy thing. Despite its kitsch factor, I all know it's silly. And I'm not saying that, gosh, you know, but if I saw that, it almost is a sculpture, in a way. What does it mean to paint like Winterhalter? This is Madame Rimsey's Korsakov. This is a very famous Winterhalter portrait. He was kind of, he sort of suffered a little bit of the Bouguereau because he said, as elaborate as the frames are, I mean, these are really, I will tell you, I feel sorry for women having to get into that. But if you didn't have to, you know, change outfits every time, that was a statement, besides your craft. But what does it mean to then paint it like this? This is by Karen Kalemnik. This was a $400,000 painting, and I'm not using money as a red herring. It sold it at Phillips not too long ago. There's obviously somebody talking about not painting well. And what does that mean? How is that an improvement on this, conceptually? Is it a parody? And if it's a parody, we've lost a lot of the beauty that was involved in this. We've lost a lot of looking. There's a lot less in Karen Kalemnik's issue than there was in the Winterhalter. And we have this beautiful painting by Franz Marc. But then we have this. And this right here is an honest, who knows where it came from, I got it off the internet. But it has a similarity. It has as much relationship between the Winterhalter and the Kalemnik as the Franz Marc original and the amateur copy. And then we have Elizabeth Peyton is an interesting sort of parodies of pop culture. But could this be Elizabeth Peyton? It was not. It was by a 16-year-old. Or that. Or something again by Karen Kalemnik. And it makes it sort of an interesting question. Of what are we actually saying with this technique? What are we saying with something that is crudely made, or something that's incomplete, or something that's less than complete, or something that we've left to abbreviate? It's not just simplicity this hand. These are things that we need to think about as people who are looking at art. Something that's by Jules Lefebvre. And does it say the same thing when someone has an amateur copy? And I say amateur, it would be amateurish in Jules Lefebvre's idea, because this person had forgotten the modeling, forgotten the structure of the neck, the flowers, the hair is averaged poorly, but yet it's in a very proud frame. It's interesting, because we have the same thing when we have imitations of Picasso. But we have similar hands, but we've seen hands like this that are very similar to Picasso, even though we laugh that that might be an imitation. Or Bouguereau, again, means something quite different. It means something quite different when we see Karen Kalemnik, who has prospered by that for some reason. Or we see something by George Stubbs, A Wonderful Zebra. Or we see this. This was a sonnet. This is a sonnet project by Rodney Popple, and this won $50,000 last year in Australia. So it makes a difference. And what we're doing is I'm not sure sometimes if we're not looking or we're expecting technique to mean something different. Maybe raw technique right now is, or maybe something like this is sort of vague, is what resonates with our culture. I think that things like this go further and further. We go to endless examples. This is Laura Owens, and that's Rosa Bonheur. And then we get into the idea of multiples, and multiples that we're used to with Andy Warhol. We're great with a gestalt with all these different images, but we've really not examined what repetition means today as far as technical. This is a very, I think this right now will become the next Mona Lisa. Now people would, again, Graydon is terrible, controversial. But I've seen this painting have more influence than almost any painting in the 19th century. It's by Bouguereau, it's Gabriel Coe, it's from about 1890. Coe was a friend of Bouguereau and he painted his daughter. But then it's been imitated and imitated and imitated and imitated. And all different meanings technically, and imitated and imitated and imitated and imitated and imitated. And and even old George Condo has made sort of an allusion to that in some strange way. And he's the one that did the nude with the growly woman. It kind of looks like some, I'm sure, don't marry one of those. They're really not. Or sincerely pay homage to. This is by Josh LaRock. He's a student of the Grand Central Academy who really found a communion with that. Now, what does it mean to copy a Bouguereau well? This is by Richard Murdoch. This is a sincere, and by sincere, I mean that there's no irony in it. And I'm not saying that the bad copies are not, the ones that are not sincere. That's a bad word to use, and I want to take that back. What I mean is it just makes a difference between you pay homage to something where you've had the training or you've had the empathy to go through the process than something that you haven't had the empathy to go through the process with. Or you've used it in some way. Maybe it's just a sincere emulation. These are questions. The thing about this lecture is I think it just needs to offer you some questions about what this means. And I think we've missed it somehow in our looking at contemporary art, what it means to paint well or not. Or somebody who was completely an imitator. This is not an homage. This was Bouguereau's wife. And this is right here. It's been mistaken as a Bouguereau for years and years and years until someone found that an old reproduction that had Elizabeth Gardner instead of William Bouguereau, and it lost about $2 million in value for people, but it's still quite a lovely painting. And I think if we weren't so obsessed with names, it might change its value.